You know, we often think we have a pretty good handle on the origins of major world religions. But what if I told you that a key part of the story, the family at the very heart of it all, was almost completely erased? Today, we're diving into the story of a group known by a single powerful name, the Desposini.
So here's the question you've probably never really thought about. After the execution of Jesus, what actually happened to his family? I mean, his brothers, his cousins? Did they just sort of vanish from the history books? Well, the answer, it turns out, is a hard no. And their story is an incredible tale of survival against some pretty overwhelming odds.
Okay, first things first, there's a key term we've got to get straight. Desposoni. It's a Greek word for Jesus' extended family, and it literally means belonging to the Master or of the Lord. And look, this wasn't just some family name, it was a declaration, a claim to a lineage that would turn out to be both a massive honor and a seriously dangerous burden to carry.
And speaking of danger, that brings us right to our first piece of evidence, a dramatic, intense encounter that takes place right in the heart of the Roman Empire, in the court of the emperor himself.
Now get this, the people who brought them in weren't just your average palace guards. The historical account says they were summoned by an evocatus. You can think of them as an imperial special agent, a decorated military veteran called back for sensitive, high-stakes duties. This little detail tells us everything we need to know. The order came directly from the top. This was serious.
And here we get this incredible contrast. I mean, on one side, you've got the Emperor Domitian, ruler of the known world, completely paranoid about any potential rivals, especially some prophesied Messiah king. And on the other, the grandnephews of Jesus, descendants of his brother Judas, and they were just simple farmers. It's the ultimate showdown, right? Raw imperial power up against a quiet spiritual lineage.
So Domitian just cuts right to the chase with one single, incredibly loaded question: are you from the family of David? He was basically asking if they were from the royal line of the foretold Messiah. A yes could have been an instant death sentence, and yet they confessed. They said yes.
So for a paranoid emperor, the next logical question is all about money. He's clearly suspecting they're funding a rebellion. He asks them about their wealth. And their answer? Between the two of them, all their property combined is worth just 9,000 denarii.
But hold on. This wasn't some secret stash of gold. It was the total value of their small plot of land, about 39 acres, that they worked themselves to pay their taxes and, to live. This was not the treasury of some revolutionary movement. It was the humble holding of two working men.
As their final proof, they didn't offer up documents or witnesses. They presented the emperor with physical evidence. They just held out their hands, showing him the calluses and the hardened skin that could only come from a life of manual labor. This was their truth, written right there on their skin.
Domitian's final test was about the kingdom he was so afraid of. When was it going to show up? Where was it? And their answer just completely disarmed him. They explained that their kingdom wasn't a worldly empire at all. They said it's not on earth, but is above the heavens, a spiritual reality that would only be revealed at the very end of the world.
And Domitian's reaction to all this? Well, the source says he found no fault in them. Instead, he just despised them as inferiors. He saw absolutely no threat, so he let them go. But then, in this stunning turn of events, he ordered the persecution of the churches to stop. Can you believe that? These two farmers, with their calloused hands and their honest answers, had just put an end to an imperial persecution. But this incredible story really begs a question. If these events were so significant, why is this account so fragmented and rare? To understand that, we have to go back a few decades earlier, to a king who tried to erase history itself.
That king was Herod the Great. And unlike the Desposini, Herod was deeply, deeply insecure about his own family background. One historian wrote that his conscience was branded by the obscenity of his lineage, because his family wasn't from the ancient, respected lines of Israel.
So Herod's insecurity led to this really cynical and destructive plan. He knew his ancestry couldn't compare to the ancient Hebrew families, especially not the royal line of David. So he cooked up this brutal idea. If no one else could prove their noble lineage, his own would seem more legitimate by default. His solution? Burn the public archives and destroy the genealogies of the entire nation.
It was a truly devastating act of cultural vandalism, but Herod's plan wasn't completely successful, because while the public records might have been destroyed, a few diligent families became the guardians of their own lineage.
So how did they do it? The source says that a few of the diligent managed to reconstruct their family histories. They used their own private records, they relied on names they had memorized, and they found surviving copies of older texts, like something called the Scroll of Days or Scroll of Generations. It was this desperate act of cultural preservation.
And crucially, these guardians of history weren't elites in the capital city. The account is very specific. The Desposini came from the small, quiet villages of Nazareth and Kokba. This was history preserved not in palaces, but out in the countryside.
And this wasn't just about saving names on a list for them. For these families, it was a source of profound pride and identity. The historian tells us they glorified that the memory of their good lineage was preserved. They knew exactly what was at stake.
And this brings our two stories full circle. After being released by Emperor Domitian, these same men, the farmers with the calloused hands who had preserved their lineage, they returned home and became respected leaders in the early churches, serving as human witnesses to the story.
It's just an incredible narrative of survival, of faith, and the quiet power of memory. But it's a story that truly was nearly lost to us.
We only know about this today because the story was captured by two early historians, Hegesippus and Julius Africanus, and then their own writings were saved by a later historian, Eusebius. Just imagine that, a story passed down like a single fragile thread through centuries of history.
So why does this obscure story matter so much? Because the account of the Desposini pulls back the curtain of theology and doctrine. It gives us a profoundly human look at the actual people, the farmers, the family, who stood right at the epicenter of a faith that would change the world.
And it leaves us with a final, lingering question. If a story this central could come so close to disappearing, it really makes you wonder how many other stories of other peoples and other moments have been completely erased, either by the deliberate fires of a king like Herod or just by the simple, quiet passage of time.